Have you ever noticed how a school feels like a living, breathing organism? During the day, it's alive with the chaos of slamming lockers and teenage laughter. But when the final bell rings and the students pour out like water from a broken dam, the building changes. It exhales. My name is Ethan. I was never a bad kid, but I was a forgetful one. I'd fallen asleep in the back of the library, tucked away in the archives where the sunlight barely reaches. I woke up at exactly 4 p.m. The silence wasn't empty, it was heavy. It felt like the building was holding its breath, waiting for me to leave. I stood up, my joints stiff, and headed for the exit. But as I reached the main hallway, I realized the sun wasn't setting. It was stuck. A deep, frozen orange glow was pouring through the high windows, painting the lockers in a color that looked like dried blood. And then, I heard it. Clang. 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 Not the electric buzz of a modern school bell. This was brass. Old. Heavy. And it was coming from the basement. I walked toward the main doors, but the hallway felt stretched. You know that feeling in a dream where you run but the door gets further away? That was my reality. I passed locker 101. Then 102. Then 103. 10 minutes later, I was still passing 103. I stopped, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached out and touched the cold metal of locker 104. It was vibrating. A low, subatomic hum that made my teeth ache. I pulled the handle. It wasn't locked. Inside, there were no textbooks. There were shoes. Hundreds of them. Small, scuffed sneakers, polished loafers, muddy boots, all neatly piled. And tucked into the corner of the locker was a Polaroid photo. It was a class picture from 1984. I looked closer. My breath hitched. In the second row, standing between a girl with pigtails and a boy in a striped shirt, was me. Same jacket. Same terrified eyes. But in the photo, I was already old. I had the gray hair and the deep wrinkles of a man who had spent 40 years in detention. I slammed the locker shut and turned to run. That's when I saw him. At the far end of the hallway, bathed in that sickly orange light, stood the hall monitor. He was 7 feet tall, his limbs long and thin like a spider's. He was wearing a gray polyester suit that looked 50 years out of style. His face, it wasn't a face. It was a white, porcelain mask with a wide, static smile painted in red. He didn't walk. He glided. And instead of a right hand, a massive brass school bell was fused to his wrist. Clang. No running in the halls, his voice boomed. It didn't come from the mask, it came from the ventilation ducts above my head. Class is in session, Ethan. You're late for the final exam. I turned into the nearest classroom, room 302. I tried to lock the door, but the lock was gone. The wood was smooth, as if it had never been bored for a handle. I was trapped. The classroom was filled with the smell of chalk dust and floor wax. I looked at the desks. They were all empty, but on each one was a single sheet of paper. I picked one up. It was a test. Only one question was printed over and over again: when does 4 p.m. end? I looked at the blackboard. The chalk was moving by itself, screeching against the slate with a sound that made my ears bleed. It was drawing a map. A map of the school. But the school didn't have an exit. It was a closed loop. A circle. The windows. I ran to the windows, desperate for a glimpse of the parking lot, of my car, of anything human. But there was no outside. The glass overlooked an endless, shifting sea of orange clouds. Other schools, other silent hallways, were floating in the distance like ghost ships. The exit is earned, Ethan, the speakers whispered. Through memory. Through sacrifice. The hall monitor entered the room. He didn't attack. He just stood there, the brass bell dripping a black, ink-like fluid onto the floor. "To leave the school, you must leave the student behind," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a yellowed piece of paper. "A hall pass." He laid it on the desk. "Sign it," he commanded. I looked at the pass. It was dated September 14, 1984. The day I first walked into this building. I realized then that the Ethan who lived a life, who went to the supermarket, who stayed at the Grand Callaway, who went to the airport, that was just a dream. I had never left this room. I had been in detention for 4 decades, imagining a life I never got to live. I picked up the pen. The ink wasn't blue. It was red. It felt warm. As I signed my name, I felt my memories of the outside world dissolve. My car. My mother's face. The taste of a cold beer. It all turned to chalk dust and blew away in the stagnant air of room 302. The hall monitor turned and walked out. I followed him, but I didn't feel afraid anymore. I felt hollow. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. My face was gone. In its place was a smooth, white porcelain surface with a permanent, painted-on smile. I looked at my right hand. It was gone, replaced by a heavy, cold brass bell. I am the hall monitor now. I wait for 4 p.m. I wait for the students who hide in the library, the ones who think they can escape the loop. I wait for the sound of footsteps on the linoleum. And when I hear them, I ring my bell. Clang. 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 No running in the halls, I whisper into the vents. "Welcome to Oak Ridge High. You're just in time for the final bell."